Okay, so then we'll just get started. Also, hi to everyone. Love to see the love from Philly, from LA, from Seattle. Super excited that you're all here with us today. So to get this talk started, our talk is Voces, Diferentes, Taboo Tech. So how we define Taboo Tech at Tequeria is, the kind of tech that is often not talked about. That's why we call it taboo. So anything from sex tech to dating tech to femtech to cannabis tech, right? These are all things that have been popping up lately. And so we really want to make a space for it at Tequeria to talk about it, to make it not so taboo, right? To bring people in because diversity is super important, specifically in taboo tech, so we don't get marginalized out of it. To get started with that, my name is Valeria, and I am the Partnerships Engagement Specialist at Tequeria. And I will let Zack introduce himself. Please give us tell us about yourself for a high-level summary of what you do at Grindr, and then what Grindr does.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. So hi, everybody. My name is Zack Ramirez, pronouns he, him. And I am the program manager for our talent acquisition team here at Grindr. So what that means is I work, the sort of TLDR of that is I like to say I do everything in recruiting except for actually talk to the people on the phone. So my primary sort of oversight includes partnerships and vendors, operations, our internship program, and employer branding for the company, which obviously employer branding for Grindr is super interesting. And a little bit about Grindr. So Grindr is the largest social networking app for the gay, bi, trans, and queer community. We were founded in 2009, so we're actually a relatively seasoned tech organization. And, we initially started as the gay hookup app. And I'm happy to dive in maybe a little bit later to talk more about the founding and sort of evolution. But high level, since our founding, we've really grown in to be a part of the fabric that helps connect the global queer community with one another. So, oftentimes, folks who are part of the LGBTQ community, they may, perhaps they live in big cities where there's a highly visible queer community around them. But more often than not, they live in communities where there isn't that highly visible queer community, or maybe they're not able to live as out and open in their everyday lives. And so they turn to Grindr to help find that. And so I'm super proud to work for a company that fosters that experience for people. And full transparency, I am one of probably the early adopters of Grindr, longtime user. And so, yeah, it's amazing to work for an organization that is so much a part of my identity, allows me to be myself, and gets to help my community.
That's incredible. I love to hear that. And also it's super important to have, the people who are using your app be a part of the people that are building the app, right? So that is really awesome to hear. And I'm super excited to hear what Grindr's planning for Gay Christmas, because I had never called it that, but Halloween is my favorite holiday. It is the one holiday where you get to just see people be all kinds of silly and creative. And I feel like we don't have enough of that creativity on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, I agree. I think it gives people an opportunity to sort of step outside themselves, but then also maybe authentically be themselves in so many ways, right? So, for instance, our colleagues, they don't show up regularly in harnesses and, sort of scandalous costumes, but, on Halloween, we will probably. Actually, I will say at Grindr, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do.
Okay, that sounds incredible. I love that.
Yeah, I have a fun story about it. So I don't know if folks are familiar, but we recently went public in 2022, and I got to be there at the New York Stock Exchange for opening day, or listing day. And it was super incredible to see it and be a part of it. And one of the things, so, obviously Wall Street is historically a very sort of cis, heteronormative environment. And we were able to work with them to sort of hopefully maybe move the needle a little bit, where, generally for listing days, folks they have something that they're expected to wear, whether that's like a suit or a tie with a collar, if you're if you're identified as a male, like all these other things. And we got special, we worked with them to curate like a special wardrobe allowance for listing day. So I actually did wear my harness to listing day at the at the New York Stock Exchange, which was super, super amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful video on it. I think either on our channels and definitely on the New York Stock Exchange channels of the events that we held. Like we put up a stage in front of the Wall Street building, and there were drag performers, queer artists, all performing, and it was just like this amazing party. And the irony is, I don't know the exact year details of it, but it was I want to say 30, 40 years from the AIDS demonstration, the sit down AIDS demonstration, and so it was super cool to sort of have that evolution of Wall Street from that to then be a part of the Grindr's listing as a public company.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, like, in general, Wall Street just seems really boring, but I'm sure y'all brought the spice, y'all brought the color.
It was, I mean, it is, but like not that day. We plastered the floor with like rainbows, and yeah, you see all these sort of like Wall Street people in their suits, and they're just watching the Grindr team just party and
Do
have
their
a good
thing.
time, celebrate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm definitely gonna have to watch the video. Thank you, Steph, for posting it in the chat. So in case anyone else has a tab open where they can bookmark it, I'm definitely gonna watch it later. I wanted to ask, like a different question. So now that we've seen, that Taboo Tech is on the rise, specifically with, seeing that Grindr was able to go public, and that's incredible. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us maybe like why you think in the past it's been like so stigmatized and like more seen as taboo?
Oh, certainly. So, I think queer people and queer spaces have often been villainized throughout history and certainly in modern America. And so to see the evolution of people's sort of viewpoint changing, I actually like to think Grindr's been sort of a part of that. I hopefully help people find each other, right? Connect, create a community, make their voices heard. Mm-hmm. And so I think with that comes a lot of power or empowerment, I should say. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of how, the sort of evolution of both the queer community, but also obviously Grindr as a tech company, it's gone sort of hand in hand.
Yeah, that's really incredible. I'm super excited to hear that. And it's also really incredible to have you here because you have been early on and seen that evolution happen, right? What was it like, when you were earlier on in Grindr? What was it like telling friends, family, like, this is where I work? What were those like reactions that you got? And has that also changed and just kind of becoming more like commonplace?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I'm gonna, hopefully this isn't like too out of step with the question, but just to give a little bit of context, I grew up in a very, very small town in about 40 minutes northeast of Flint, Michigan. And with that, there was certainly, obviously, certainly there were gay or queer people, but there wasn't I didn't see them. Certainly nobody was out in my school or earlier on. And so Grindr was really the only way that I was able to start connecting with people in my area and build that community for myself. And so I came out, so sorry, I just wanted to paint that lens. I came out when I was 18. And my family was actually really, really receptive to it. Obviously, certain hiccups, right, along the way of them maybe not understanding things or processing, but overall, very, very supportive family. So when I got the role at Grindr, they were like, how cool that, because part of what brought me to Grindr and what I think is really important for Taboo Tech spaces is like that it enables you or allows you a certain degree of authenticity in the workplace. Certainly, it was the first time that I had ever experienced it. Prior to Grindr, I was at like a health tech company, and prior to that, I was in higher ed, and so it was really incredible to have this experience where I could come and talk about dates that I went on, or I didn't have to lower my voice in meetings to feel seen or heard or respected. And I think that, as a taboo tech company, and I think this is true across the board, that's something that we can create for our teams as we continue to build them and grow the industry.
That's incredible. I love to hear that. Thank you so much for that answer. And I feel like, having an app such as, I guess that's like the great thing about tech is that it kind of makes things a lot more accessible, right? It allows you to find community in spaces that you wouldn't normally be able to find it. Specifically, like at least for me within Tequeria, I didn't know where to find, like other Latine people in tech. And then all of a sudden there's this virtual space that I can engage in. Specifically, I found it during the pandemic. And so when no one was going out of their houses, at least I had people to connect with. Much similar to how Grindr is creating community where there might not be community, such as those small towns, all throughout the country. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And, and it's so beautiful to hear like the profound impact that, organizations that do focus on, oftentimes marginalized communities, right? That they have for people. And so it's really incredible to be a part of.
Great. Okay. So, moving on to another question, what do you think what's an area of taboo tech that you think still has to be explored?
Oh my gosh, so many. I was thinking about this earlier too, because the irony is, if you think about taboo, I mean, oftentimes we think about sex, but certainly there's like health, right? Like, and I'll speak about it from a queer lens, but like HIV and STIs are often still super stigmatized in this country, across the globe, and certainly in the tech space. So those are areas that we need to make strides in creating those inclusive products for people to support them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that, for us, having a company that supports the community holistically is just, super, super valuable. And I think people have found a lot of like really incredible joy out of it.
I love to hear that. Do you know if Grindr is working on maybe any sort of like installations or events, community events around those topics?
Yeah, I mean, well, absolutely. So internally, we do a lot for our teams to help them, become closer to their communities. So one of our departments is Grindr for Equality. And so a little backstory about Grindr for Equality. Grindr for Equality was actually founded in 2014 as a result of the Syrian refugee crisis. And our founder and CEO at the time, Joel Simkai, he wanted to find a way to support people that were being displaced by the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he ended up doing was, TLDR on it, was founding Grindr for Equality, brought in a one-person team at the time. It's now a two-person team. But
love the growth.
Yeah. But the impact that they get to make is so incredible. So, what we did is we identified where people were relocating to. And I guess just for a little background on folks, the way that Grindr works is it's a grid of people, and it's a location-based app. So, if I have a profile, it'll tell you, sort of like the next nearest profile and so on and so forth, distance outwards.
Mm-hmm.
So we identified where folks were moving to. We worked with various support resources and organizations in those new communities. And we pushed that information out to users in the app so that they could find those more easily. And it was something that was so successful that we realized we could replicate it in a variety of different ways. And so Grindr for Equality, essentially their work is really around working with local grassroots organizations on various initiatives that are going to elevate or liberate or support the global queer community. A couple examples of that. Most recently, we partnered with a organization called Building Healthier Online Communities to build a function into the app where people can go in and request free at-home HIV testing kits directly to their doors. During the monkeypox crisis, we partnered with the CDC and various local health organizations to help people identify information about monkeypox, because obviously things were unfolding really rapidly. And also local vaccination centers and reminders. So we do a lot of really cool work within the community that I think people probably don't always like recognize. I mean, obviously, like the Grindr app in and of itself is, in my view, an impactful and something that moves the needle on social justice issues for the queer community. But some of the ancillary work that we do with local and grassroots organizations are so impactful and totally worth chatting more about. And happy to share more projects on them. For instance, we have a program that we run every election cycle called Grind the Vote, where we identify various like ballot initiatives or where local candidates stand on LGBTQ issues. And then we pass that information over to users so that we can, one, educate them on what's happening on the ground in their communities, but then also to hopefully to activate them, right? Get their voices heard in the ballot box. Yeah, so it's I'm very, very proud of a lot of the work that Grindr, well, all the work that Grindr does, but particularly in that space.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I love to hear that Grindr is partnering up with grassroots organizations and disseminating really, really important information. Because I didn't know those things about, getting local information about like vaccinations or monkeypox or like all these things, which were really, really incredible because it's a potential event where it could further stigmatize the community. So knowing that, Grindr is working with its resources to make sure that everyone has the important information available to them is super important. And I love to hear that.
Yeah, and I think it's an opportunity for a lot of those, and a lot of companies that might be considered taboo tech, right? That there's real impact that they have. Oftentimes these are the voices that don't get recognized or heard. And so, there's a lot of really important work to be done across. So
absolutely. And then further adding on to that question a little bit, because I love hearing that, Grindr is working with grassroots organizations, but what do you think, like within Taboo Tech, we can do to better promote opportunities for Latinx or BIPOC communities? Because there's so much intersectionality, and then there's more intersectionality within the queer communities, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think one is certainly around just branding and getting the word out there, right? Like, I mean, I can think of certainly like some taboo tech organizations, right? Grindr could be one of them, OnlyFans, and they're all certainly like sex related. But I'm sure there's so many other organizations that are supporting so many different facets of both, the Latinx community, the queer community, that, the louder we are, the more we get our voices out there, the more visibility we get, the more buy-in we get from our communities, and the more power that we have. And so, I think as an organization, like, and I also think too, by its very nature, Taboo Tech is an inclusive space because of the communities that they often serve. And so, the more people that we have on board with our organizations, the more power that we have in our respective areas.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I also just posted in the chat, we do have about 8 minutes left of our session. So in case anyone has any questions to ask Zack about his time in Grindr or just in general working within the Taboo Tech industry, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And we will talk through them. Otherwise, we can continue talking, Zack.
Yeah, I'm happy either way. I haven't been looking at the chat, but I can pull it up real quick.
Oh, no worries. I think another good question or another good topic that we can talk about is what advice or like recommendations do you have for people that do want to be in this industry? I think I saw some people that were like very interested.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, they, I think twofold. And I don't know if this is a fair assessment or not, but I think it's worth saying. But at Grindr or across Taboo Tech, like certainly excellence in your field, right? Like we need people who like are really knowledgeable because there's a lot of work to be done, and so it's really really important that we have folks that are able to perform the work in various ways. But I think in addition to that, like, don't be afraid to join. I know that, people have their own personal journeys that they're going on in their careers. And certainly for me, joining Grindr was a no-brainer because it matched so closely with who I am as a person, the community I identify with. But don't be afraid of diving into that. It's actually really interesting. People, at least for me, have been really receptive of working in this industry. And if anything, it's really helped me evolve into the next levels of my career. And so definitely don't be afraid of it. And then for folks who are interested in joining any organization, but particularly like Grindr or a Taboo Tech organization, networking and coming to talks like this are so vital to again consolidating our voices, getting together, and moving forward. So I think people who are here are doing the right things if they're interested in looking into these areas. And go beyond those boundaries, right? Like, for me, for instance, I know this has been a lot of like sort of my lens working for a queer focused company, but there are so many other organizations that we can work with and partner with to elevate those voices, elevate those organizations, and then thereby creating a space where folks, feel seen, heard, for what they need, what they're looking for.
Totally. I love that. We do have a question from William, and then also Jesse mentioned that they do have 4 people from their undergrad that work at Grindr. So that's awesome to hear.
How fun!
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's a small world. Grindr is a pretty small organization, so it's a small world.
That's awesome. Okay, so a question from William. They asked, what is the number one non-technical thing that you look for in a new hire for a technical role? So this is perfect because you do work in talent, program manager, but talent. So what would be your advice for that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, can you let me read the question, actually. I think that'll help me.
A non-technical skill that you look for technical roles.
Perfect. Yes. So I would say for me, when I'm looking at folks who could potentially join Grindr, values alignment is so important to the work that we do, because the work we do is so critical, right, to our community. To paint the picture of Grindr, Grindr is ultimately an app made up of people, oftentimes in their most vulnerable states, right? Looking for sex, looking for love, looking for friendship, connection, community. And so the folks that we bring on board, regardless of role, regardless of level, they have to buy into that because of the importance that we play in our users' lives. And so I would say for Grindr, values alignment, and I think that's probably true most organizations, right? Like you want the value, you want the the mission of the company to resonate with the person who is going to be joining. You know, and I'll be totally honest, we have tons of people from all different backgrounds that work at Grindr, right? So, you know, some folks are a part of the community and a lot of folks are not a part of the community, but we are all bound together by this shared sense of purpose and mission to elevate the global queer community. And so I would say that would be number one. Honestly, I think that's the most important thing. I think that's the thing to me that threads the needle between all roles is that shared commitment to the work that we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to, you know, talking about how you're an early user of the app and now you're working there. So you really can speak to the things that are important to the community when you're designing a product for the community, right?
Oh, absolutely. Our users' voices are integral to, you know, the creating the best experience for them. So, and I think that translates to the staff that we have as well.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe just one last quick question, because you did mention how Grindr in general is pretty inclusive just based on the product alone, right? Like anything that happens to be in Taboo Tech, you go into it because you're definitely passionate about that space. So what do ERGs look like within Grindr?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. So we actually don't have a formalized ERG, and that's mostly because, and this is like, it's mostly because of the size of the organization, right? So, you know, once you get to a certain number of employees, that those become like a little bit more important for people to find those communities. But because we're a relatively small organization, we all interact with each other really regularly. We actually don't have formalized ERGs. What we do have is a wonderful series of programs internally for employees, a lot of which relate to the queer community, to help our employees feel more connected to the user base, understand our user base, and create an inclusive experience for the folks that we're bringing in. So a couple of the programs that we run, we do, they're about every other week. We call them G-Free Kikis that Grindr for Equality runs, where they will talk about various topics related to LGBTQ people, or topics that are impacting them. So, you know, and which is especially important for us, obviously, as an organization, but in the times that we're in, where there's been an unprecedented amount of anti-LGBTQ legislation presented in state and local governments. And so the more we keep those conversations going, the more impact that we can have for our community.
Yeah.
But I know we're kind of at time, but yeah, we do a lot of really impactful work, and, you know, creating an inclusive space for people as they come into the company.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey and all of your experience with us, Zack. It's been incredible getting to talk to you and getting to learn more about Grindr and the Taboo Tech and space in general. I highly encourage everyone to connect with Zack on LinkedIn or connect outside of this. It seems like people are really interested, which we love to see, and we love connecting community as well. So I hope to see y'all in the next sessions. Thank you again. See you soon. Talk soon, Zack.
Thank you, Val. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.